Start your day with Morning Edition and wind it down with All Things Considered, only on KPBS. From global headlines to local stories, stay informed, inspired, and connected. Tune in daily or listen anytime at kpbs.org.
It's time for KPBS Midday Edition. On today's show, the arts and culture moving San Diego. I'm Jade Hindman with conversations that keep you informed, inspired, and make you think. Author Don Winslow is back and out with a new book. He'll join us live to talk about the final score. Then Riot Productions has a new play about the stress of auditioning, plus your weekend preview. That's ahead on Midday Edition. Crime fiction fans are in for a treat. Acclaimed author Don Winslow has returned to fiction with a new book, The Final Score. It's a collection of 6 short crime novellas. The release comes just weeks before the premiere of feature film Crime 101, based on Winslow's short novel of the same name. That film stars Chris Hemsworth and Halle Berry, along with other big names. And joining me to talk about his return to fiction and the upcoming film is California's own Don Winslow. Don, welcome back to Midday Edition. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I'm great. I'm glad to hear that you're great. Listen, the last time you were on the show, we talked about your novel, City in Ruins, and in a way, that book was a farewell to your career in fiction writing. But now you're out with another, so tell me what changed.
The stories in this book just kept talking to me. I did retire. I thought I had retired. If I was lying to myself as well. But then, the ideas and the characters and some of the conflicts that became this book just kept talking to me and wouldn't shut up. So I finally sat down and wrote them.
All right. Well, let's talk about this new book, The Final Score. It is a collection of 6 novellas. What are some through lines between the stories?
I think the major through line is about identity. It's about people who have to make decisions, and sometimes the choices aren't always good. It's not always so simple between right and wrong. And once they've made these choices, it's about, okay, who are we now? Now, what am I going to be?
So give me a sneak peek at the stories we'll get with this collection. Who are the main characters themselves?
Boy, they vary. The first story, which is set in the San Diego area, is about a career high-level thief who is about to report to prison and knows that the probability is he's going to die there, and needs one final score to set his wife up for the rest of her life. So that takes place around San Diego. There are some others in Rhode Island. One is about a teenage kid who illegally delivers booze to customers on Sundays when that state was dry. Another one is just a couple of mob guys sitting around talking over breakfast. In fact, there's no narrative in it at all. It's all dialogue. There's a story again set in San Diego about a movie star who comes down to on a film shoot, and she's a problem and she needs to be sort of babysat. And some old characters of mine, Boone Daniels, are in charge of trying to get her through that. And then the final story, Collision, is about a good guy, a father and a husband who has one random moment of violence that flips his life upside down.
Wow, it sounds also very fascinating. Why did you want to go with a collection of short stories for this one? I mean, what's unique about that format?
It allows you, sometimes I think limitations are liberating, that format forces you to be concise and clean and efficient in your language. Also, there are some stories, they're good stories, but they don't have the bone structure, the skeleton to hold up the musculature, if you will, of a complete novel. But they're still good stories, and they should be told.
I couldn't agree more with you when you say that, having some constraints is a good thing because as a
Hmm.
writer, I know you could go on and on and on.
Right.
Yeah. Well, how do the topics and the questions you engage in the final score reflect some of the broader societal questions we're grappling with right now?
Well, I think we're at a moment where we are really grappling with the idea of who we are and who we want to be. You know, having made a decision a year ago that I think was the wrong decision. I think the country's now looking at itself and wondering, okay, who are we now? What are we going to be? What choices are we faced with? That we need to decide, and then what are the consequences of those choices?
Yeah. Well, and I know, as I said before, when we spoke with you last, you were retiring from writing to focus more on political advocacy. Tell us
Mhm.
about that. Tell us, and can you pinpoint really the moment your activism accelerated and what kept you going over the years?
Yeah, I want to say it was 2015 when Mr. Trump came down that escalator, and then when he started to verbally assault immigrants, Mexicans, Mexican Americans, my friends and neighbors, people that I love. That really angered me. It still angers me when he, poked fun at Serge, a disabled reporter, um, all kinds of things. And then, of course, January 6th, which I think is one of the most disgraceful, shameful days in American history. And that certainly has kept me going. So, boy, how do I count the ways?
Yeah, yeah. Well, tell us about your activism strategy. How has storytelling helped you craft your political messaging, many of which have gone viral?
Yeah, listen, we've had hundreds of millions of views on the videos that we've made. We dropped one, in fact, yesterday about, do you remember what America used to be? And I hope people do and want to see that again. Listen, I think we all bring our whatever we have to our activism. And in my case, I think I'm a fairly decent storyteller. And so I try in these videos and these messages to speak plainly to people, not to speak down to people, but to speak in plain, frank language, and each one, tell a little bit of a story, have a little bit of a narrative. So that's the strategy.
Yeah, well, I know you've received some backlash, even threats online
Yeah,
about your activism. And I read in an article that you canceled your book tour for the final score because of these threats.
yeah.
But you've maintained your presence online. So talk about why that's so important.
Well, listen, these threats, listen, I've always gotten threats. I wrote about the Mexican drug cartels, not always to their pleasure, but more recently, the threats have come from the right wing, and I think they've accelerated because of these videos. We don't take a penny in contributions. Have never monetized any of this stuff, and so it's all paid for out of pocket. And what pays for the videos are the books. And so if you want to shut down the videos, one way of doing that is to shut down the books. One way of shutting down the books is to force us to cancel appearances because that costs, potentially hundreds of sales for every appearance. And as maddening as it is to give into those threats, you can't put other people at risk. You can't ask the public to come out, in a place that you can't, be fully secure. And so that I think, and I don't think it's coincidental that we're going to go into a midterm election year, is I think what all those threats are about. Now, having said that, the attempt to silence us clearly hasn't worked because we dropped a big video yesterday, and here I am talking on the radio.
When you look at the state of things right now, what does advocacy mean to you?
Well, advocacy, I think, means to me, and I think to everybody, primarily it's to stick up for people who don't have the voice to stick up for themselves. I'm very fortunate in that I have a platform. It's not humongous, but it's large, and I can reach out to millions of people and advocate for people who don't have that power, don't have that leverage to advocate for themselves.
Well, I want to get back to your book because I'm curious to know how your approach to writing evolved in that time off that you took. I mean, did that space teach you anything that you've brought into your work recently?
I think it taught me that I can't help but write, having tried not to. Uh, Listen, I think I take some chances in this book. I really experimented with different forms, the structure of a novella as opposed to the structure of a novel. One story that I alluded to is just narrative. I wanted to see if I mean it's just dialogue. I wanted to see if I could tell a complete story just through people talking to each other. So this book, I had the freedom to do those things, which was a lot of fun.
I also want to talk about this upcoming film, Crime 101,
Yeah.
based on a story from your 2020 collection, Broken.
Mhm.
And it comes out just before Valentine's Day. What does it mean to have this particular work adapted to the screen?
Listen, it's great. I was just really pleased with the way the film came out. Bart Layton, the writer director, did a wonderful job with it. It's got terrific actors and terrific performances. So, it's a kick. It's a lot of fun when it happens that way. So I'm delighted with it. The other great thing about getting a movie made is the number of people it employs. One day you're sitting in your office early in the morning and you have this small idea, really. And then, a few years later, 300 or 400 people are paying tuitions and house payments and mortgages and things, from that little idea. And that's really cool.
Yeah, it is. Upon watching your story come to life on screen, did you learn anything new about the characters? Anything that surprised you?
Yeah, Bart did a great job, I think, in deepening some of the characters, because this comes from a short story. So he had a lot more length and to work with the characters. Actors are always a revelation, and in this case, a good revelation. You write some dialogue, and some of it, comes straight from the book, some of it doesn't, and then all of a sudden it becomes real. There's a real voice and a real human being saying it. And that can always be a little surprising, in this case for the good.
Well, bringing it back to your philosophy around activism, how do you see your role as a writer evolving during this fraught time in history?
Well, listen, I think when you write on the topics that I tend to write on, I've written a lot about border issues. I've written a lot about drug trafficking, about addiction, about immigration, about imprisonment. Those topics perforce make you somewhat political because when you research them and when you write them, you learn things. I used to think that unless I were politically active on, for instance, the drug issue, I was just another guy making money off drugs by writing books about it. You know, so I think that fiction writers can do things that, no offense intended, journalists can't. In that we can bring the reader into the psychological and emotional lives of people in great detail. So, it's one thing to talk about, quote, illegal immigration, end quote. It's another thing if I can take you on a journey, with, say, a 10-year-old boy coming up from Central America and trying to make it into this country. It's one thing to talk about, the opioid crisis, but if I can put you for, hours with a 26-year-old woman addicted to heroin, I think you see those issues differently. And I think that that's something that uniquely fiction can do.
Hmm. The final story in this book of yours is also being adapted for the screen. It's called Collision. What are your
Mhm.
hopes and dreams for that project?
The hopes and dreams are always the same. You hope that, listen, I'm aware that there are going to have to be changes because films and books are two different breeds of cat. They have different needs. And so there's always going to have to be changes and compression and things like that. But what you always hope for is that they retain the soul of the story and the soul of the character. And I have confidence that they will.
Wow. Well, your first year out of retirement is already shaping up to be huge. So what's next for you? Any other projects in the works?
There's a bunch of projects in the works. There's the book that you mentioned, City in Ruins, that is the third of a trilogy. The first of that trilogy is in process for a film with Austin Butler. There's talk about some television series. In fact, I hope they shoot here locally on some other projects. And so there's a lot going on. As for me personally, I don't know. I really don't. I'm just sort of taking it all in right now and enjoying it. And then I'll kind of sit down with myself and see what the world looks like.
Well, it is always an honor, Don. I've been speaking with Don Winslow, best-selling author based in California. His new book, The Final Score, is out now, and you can see Crime 101 in theaters on February 13th. Don, thank you so much, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I always appreciate it.
Coming up, callbacks are always stressful for actors, in part because you just never know who you might be paired with to read a scene.
Oh man, I just hope that this person is not going to be at this audition, because that would just throw me off my game. And that person's always there, either coming out or going in just as you are going into the waiting room.
A new show, Audition Sides, shows what happens when ex-lovers get thrown together for an intimate scene. KPBS is back after the break. Welcome back to Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. Any actor will tell you auditioning is one of the most stressful parts of the job. Well, a new play from Riot Productions called Audition Sides gives a behind-the-scenes look into that world. It's a romantic dramedy about two actors with a past history who are thrown into a callback together. Audition Sides first debuted at the San Diego International Fringe Festival in 2024, where it won Outstanding Premiere. Well, it now returns for 4 performances this weekend. KPBS Arts reporter Beth Accomando spoke with Sarah Alida Leclerc, the playwright, lead actress, and co-founder of Riot Productions. Here's that conversation.
Sarah, you have a new play opening this weekend called Audition Sides. So to begin with, for non-theater people, explain what Audition Sides are.
So when you go in for a callback, usually you do your initial audition and then you go in for the callback with a smaller group of people, and they'll give you a cold read of a short scene that they want to see you so that everybody's doing the same material. Or sometimes they'll ask you to do a side with another person who's either been precast in the role or just to see how your chemistry is with that other person. It's one of the most stressful things that we do as actors, honestly, especially in older days before there was intimacy coordinators that would help you kind of navigate romantic scenes, as this one is. They would often just sort of hand you these pieces of paper that would have a very intense romantic scene and send you off with a guy whose name you didn't know, who you had met 20 seconds before, and say, okay, well, figure something out and come back in when you're ready to show us. And on the line is whether or not you get this job. So no pressure.
And why did you want to use this as the backdrop for your play?
It's always been something that I find quite absurd, especially as a female actor, that we spend so much time in preparation. So you're memorizing your material, you're cutting your specific piece that you're going to bring in and show them. You're dressing as if for a date. You're getting your hair and makeup ready. You're spending hours, if not days and weeks, preparing for what could be a minute or less. So I make the point in our play that it's like speed dating. It's 5 minutes across the table from someone who probably won't call you back. So yeah, I find that very comical. It doesn't stress me out. I really enjoy going to auditions and callbacks. It's one of my favorite parts about being an actor. That's the backdrop for the larger piece, which is kind of about how hard it is to lose the one person who sees you for who you really are, and what we do when you have a relationship where love was not enough. How do you navigate, like, finding your way back to even being able to be in the room together, and some painful topics that I tried to put into like a kind of silly, absurd way to heighten the stakes.
Well, you mentioned that sometimes you're thrown into a scene, an intimate scene with a total stranger, but kind of the conceit of this is it's not a total stranger.
Right.
So how does that intensify or complicate the situation?
Yeah. So I've always been fascinated by the story of Clara Schumann and Johannes Brahms, who were like 19th century composers, and she was a singer pianist, and he was obviously Brahms of Brahms' Lullaby. And they had this like very intense emotional affair across decades. So they had this intensity for each other, but she would never allow them to be together. And that's sort of where I started with this piece, is I thought about who is the worst person? And that often happens, that you go into a callback that you think, oh man, I just hope that this person is not going to be at this audition, because that would just throw me off my game. And that person's always there, either coming out or going in just as you are going into the waiting room. And to have to pull it together and be professional in these heightened stakes when it's somebody that you want to be with but can't be, it would be easy to ignore them, but they've been put together in this callback so that they're in this very romantic scene together, saying things to each other that they really want to say to each other in reality. And it's forcing them to relive a lot of the parts of their relationship that they would prefer to not bring up anymore, but they can't because this is their job.
Well, and also for an actor, you're frequently drawing on your own personal history and experiences in order to make a performance or a scene play more real.
Yeah.
So you're in this situation of tapping into that to make a false scene
Exactly.
when you're actually tapping into very real emotions.
Yeah, this would be a nightmare for me to have to navigate. It's hard enough to be in a show with someone who you have any history with. In any case, it's a wonderful thing when it's somebody that you've done a show with before, but it's a very hard thing if you have any kind of contentious history, even to just be in the same space and to be unself-conscious about your work. Kristen Stewart gave that great interview to Vanity Fair talking about how acting and performance is inherently embarrassing. And I love that idea, because it is, like, to be as vulnerable and ugly as we have to be, it's very hard to do that. And so we give a lot of trust to the actors around us. And that's hard if it's somebody who you've broken trust with in real life. Trying to do a scene with or in front of somebody who you used to love while trying to hold that part of yourself in just enough check to be able to give the tears and move authentically and deliver the lines in a way that feels less than stilted is part of what you'll see us go through.
I'm not crazy. There's something here.
You're not crazy?
Well, then why? Every time I try to get close to you, you're physically pushing me away. Every time.
I'm not 20 anymore. I know what I want, and I know who's going to give that to me.
Now, this is a very intimate show in terms of this relationship and this physical space, but you also throw in another character
Yes.
to kind of contradict that mood.
Yeah, originally I wrote the character of Proctor, an audition proctor, which is somebody who is usually like sitting at the table in the waiting room. They're managing all the people that are waiting. They're the go-between between the team that's in the actual room, the production team, and then they're the ones that will call you in. And so originally when I wrote this script, I had her there just to tell us that we were going to have to read together, and then she disappeared for the rest of the play. But my partner and co-founder of Riot, Jocelyn Johnson, when we were reading this play in development, was so funny in the little bits that I gave her and so dry, and she has such great comic timing as an actress that I was like, okay, so there's opportunity here for her to be that clown in Cirque du Soleil that helps you release the tension. So she usually will pop back in whenever we've had some really brutal moments in these fights that the man and woman keep provoking in each other, the truth that keeps coming out. She'll come dancing out on the hunt for her eternally lost Starbucks cup. And so she'll repeat things that she's heard the director say. So she tells us unintentionally that some of the roles are precast, but definitely not our roles, she thinks, for sure, but maybe. She tells us,
I know I'm not the director.
No.
And I mean, I shouldn't be directing you guys. I mean, you are the professionals.
So they say.
But if I just had to pick like one tiny thing, I can't help but notice that you guys don't ever really make eye contact with each other, and I think it would really help.
I try to write for other actors. I think that's one of our main audiences for Riot. And so it is a love letter to actors and what we go through. But hopefully the relationship stuff is something that's universal that I think everyone will relate to. And then you can see how silly what we go through is, get an inside look.
And this is being produced by Riot Productions, which you co-founded. Talk a little bit about kind of the mission of this company.
Yeah, so we're an intersectional feminist collective that is trying to amplify the voices of women plus. We want to exist at the intersection of the BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus communities so that when we're amplifying women, we're also making sure that while our stories always feature women who have arc and agency, we're making sure that those stories are balanced, that we're not using our platform to emasculate men. We want to show complex humans in relationship with each other, but we're also trying to make sure we have representation so that gender is fluid and roles don't have to be restricted to anyone, whether it's size or ethnicity or experience. So we look for, as I said, stories where the women have arc and agency, where they don't just exist to make men better, which is something specifically for musicals. That's a trap that many authors, including women, want to put women characters into, that they're mothers, wives, girlfriends, sisters who exist in sort of like purity and perfection, and there's nothing that they need to change and there's nothing that they need to grow. They're just there to help the man want to be a better man. And so what we're trying to show is that women fail and fall and stumble and succeed anyway and overcome obstacles and exist in complexity with the people around us. I was very frustrated as an actress seeing the pieces that theaters would put up, I'm going to say in quotes, for women. Often women sitting around with their sisters at kitchen tables talking about their mothers or talking about their lovers or talking about the past in every way and never being allowed to dwell in action in the present or look to the future. And so that's what we're trying to do, is at least dwell in the present and hopefully move towards the future.
Now, we are currently in some very turbulent times. What do you see as the role of an artist and a theater company like this at this particular moment?
Yeah, I feel really grateful that we live in San Diego, which is such a supportive artists community. We're so lucky to have the Conrad Prebys Activate Brave Spaces grant this year in connection with Moxie Theater and Loud Fridge Theater. We have a $250,000 grant that pays for our rent so that we can be at Moxie at the theater venue. All of our funding comes from private donations like that, because I think a lot of people in San Diego, at least, see that our stories are essential to making sure that truth stays truth and that people continue to be represented and that women especially are not silenced, that we're finding brave spaces where we can activate those stories, to be frank, that we can show women who swear and are promiscuous and are unfaithful, that they don't have to fit this plastic Barbie doll mold. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And I see many of the small theaters, especially, who don't necessarily have to be beholden to what our season ticket holders want. We don't have to find a safe path. We don't have to be beholden to censorship. We're really inventing new stuff, and we're kind of following in the footsteps of many of these really amazing theaters, like our friends at Loud Fridge, that we're trying to see how can we innovate this model? How can we make it more about what people want to see, what actors want to do? And that's why I wrote Audition Sides.
And you mentioned Moxie. You are a theater company, or have been a theater company, without a permanent home or, brick and mortar kind of place. So how does it feel this season to actually have a home?
It's such a relief. It's very stressful. Producing is very stressful. I do not like it. It's not fun. So, yeah, to be able to have, a team that is made up all of my friends that are there at Moxie. They're so supportive. We know now the space. I was on, I think, season 19 and season 20 of Moxie's regular season as an actress myself. So it feels like my home anyway. But then to be able to be welcomed as they've welcomed us so warmly, yeah, it's just wonderful thinking about not only these pieces that we're doing now. This is our second piece. We did Love, Loss, and What I Wore in October. But to be able to think about our summer musical that is going to have like a physical set, and that's possible because we're going to be able to be in there for 2 weeks, is just a gift beyond compare. So to just be able to think about these pieces that aren't so suited to black box. We have been choosing a lot of pieces that are very black box, a stool and a cube. Yeah, it's wonderful to have been in the space last week, to sit there with our lighting designer, Hayden St. Clair, and talk with their tech experts at Moxie to say, what did we need? And were there things that needed to be physically moved in the lighting grid? Just figuring out how we're going to do the box office, and then realizing that we're going to have help with ushers and all these little luxuries that brick and mortar theaters get to have. It's just been such a delight.
Well, thank you very much for talking about Riot Productions and Audition Sides.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was playwright and actress Sarah Alita LeClaire speaking with KPBS's Beth Accomando. Tomorrow, her play Audition Sides kicks off 3 days of performances at Moxie Theater. Up next, Julia Dixon Evans tells us what's on her weekend arts calendar. KPBS Midday Edition returns after the break. Welcome back. You're listening to KPBS Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. For our weekend preview, we've got honeybees, knitting, art, and music on a ship. And joining me with the latest is KPBS arts reporter and host of the Finest podcast, Julia Dixon Evans. Hey, Julia.
Hey, Jade. Thanks for having me.
Always great to have you on. So first up is a new exhibit opening at the Central Library Art Gallery downtown. It's called Mother Tongues. So what stood out to you with this exhibit?
Yeah, this one caught my eye for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is how lovely the Central Library's art gallery is. It's up on the 9th floor of the downtown library, above the dome, and it overlooks downtown. So if you haven't been, check it out for that reason first. And this exhibit is a study of textile art, particularly in the context of textile work being traditionally domestic and traditionally women's work. It's a group show with a really impressive impressive list of local women artists like Shitra Gopalakrishnan, Leila Khalilzadeh Agdami, Kirsten Hom, Yasmin Kasum, Shireen Tawfiq, just a great collection of artists working with textiles. And they're looking at migrations and ancestral traditions. There's some big hanging installation pieces, some garments, smaller wall pieces, collages, a lot of variety in the work. There's an opening reception on Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. with a DJ spinning some live music, so it should be a nice little party. It'll be on view through April 18th. The art gallery is always free, but you need to be mindful that it has slightly different hours than the main library, so double check the times before you head down there.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, speaking of textile arts, people actually have a chance to get involved in a community-sourced knitting art installation. So tell us about the Remember Knitting Circle.
Yeah, this is the start of a large-scale installation that's planned for 2027, designed by artist Linda Literal. It's a monthly knitting circle. Anyone can join, all levels, even total beginners. The participants are going to create a bunch of hand-knitted banners. Each stitch honors people who are affected by sexual violence. The goal of the project is awareness and mindfulness, as well as solidarity. And if you participate in any of these monthly knitting circles, you'll be acknowledged as a contributor in the final project. It's Saturday afternoon at Art Produce in North Park, and I'm excited to watch this throughout the year.
Yeah, sounds good too. One that I'm excited about is this new play. So let's talk theater here. This play is in the North County, and it's about futuristic honeybee scientists. I love it already.
So we're in a honeybee lab 20 years in the future, and 4 women scientists are tasked with keeping the last honeybee colonies alive. It's a play by Kate Douglas. It's called The Apiary, and it just opened at New Village Arts in Carlsbad, directed by Christiane Kerner and a cast of really talented locals like Melina Sellers-Phillips, Neo Russell, Michelle Caravilla, and Adelaida Martinez. Is a dark comedy, but also a little bit of like a sci-fi thriller. It's a climate catastrophe, futuristic setting, but it's also not that far away in more ways than one. And this is on stage through February 22nd.
Very interesting there. In music, the La Jolla Symphony and Chorus has a series of concerts this weekend. What caught your attention?
I mean, they're playing a composition by Frank Zappa, for one, but I was also interested in this it's a commission by La Jolla Symphony and Chorus called Breaking Boundaries by emerging composer Hannah Wolkowitz, because the score calls for some unconventional instruments, including a jelly bean shaker, a percussion instrument made out of a mason jar filled with jelly beans. So this is inspired by her grandfather's love for jelly beans. They're also performing a piece with another pretty unusual instrument. It's a rare one, relatively new, like electroacoustic instrument called a haldoraphone. It looks kind of like a cello. And these concerts, there's 2 of them, 7:30 p.m. Saturday night and 2 p.m. Sunday at Mandeville Auditorium at UC San Diego.
Well, if someone is into string quartets and historic ships, there's a concert for that too, right?
Right. So this is a project of the Hausman Quartet. It's a long-running, very popular series called Haydn Voyages. They perform these shows on the deck of the Berkeley, which is a historic ship. It's part of the Maritime Museum. This concert is quarterly, and they try to chip away at Haydn's entire string quartet repertoire. They also pair his music with other classical composers, as well as living composers. This time, one of the contemporary pieces is by Caroline Shaw, Pulitzer Prize-winning composer, and the piece is called Punctum. And the concert is Sunday at 2:30 p.m.
I love it. So before we go, you've been hard at work on the 2nd season of The Finest. You're on a break this week, but last week's episode was all about a local chocolate maker. Tell us about it and what stood out to you about her story.
So yeah, in the latest episode, we get to know Elizabeth Rosales Aguilar, or Ellie. She runs Raíz Chocolate, and her work is inspired by the traditional Mexican chocolate flavors that she grew up with, and also the sustainable farming practices of Mexico's cacao farms. And she also runs her chocolate factory out of her home. It's a certified home kitchen cottage food business. And that's where we start the episode, literally in her kitchen.
Do you want to try it now? Would you want to have like a small sip or not? It doesn't take too long.
Okay.
Do you?
Producer Anthony and I are in Ellie's home kitchen, about to try her famous champurrado. So this is a mixture of chocolate, spices, and corn, basically.
This is so good. I love it.
It's very hot. No?
It's really hot.
It's a little thick from the corn, not too sweet. A rich, spiced chocolate with hints of cinnamon. A recipe passed down through the generations.
Champurrado is a warm, cozy drink that you share with your family at home, when everyone is together, when you want a little bit of like, oh, I need a little love.
We're in her kitchen because it also happens to be the headquarters of a local business, one that started, at least partly, from a moment of exasperation. In 2019, Ellie couldn't find a job. She'd recently moved to the United States from Tijuana and was newly married. She had a strong career in marketing in Mexico, but struggled to start a new life in the U.S.
It's really hard to get a job in San Diego if you're coming from another country. Even though you have your degree, even though you have the experience, it's difficult.
She was working in a preschool to get by, but in her free time, she was rediscovering a passion from her childhood and cultural heritage.
I fell in love with the process of chocolate making.
Around that same time, California's laws were evolving, opening the door for a different kind of business. Suddenly, a new possibility emerged.
I was really amazed. I was like, what? You can do this at home? Are you kidding me?
Ellie went all in, researching, testing recipes, making chocolate in her home kitchen, and selling it at markets. It was a hit, and the project felt like it could be sustainable.
I worked in a preschool for 1 year, and in 2 events, I got half of the year's salary in just 2 weekends.
That's amazing.
And that is crazy.
Ellie's experiment turned into the job she was looking for. But just a few years ago, her chocolate business would have been illegal. Today, we go inside a real cottage food business to explore how it could challenge a massive, shadowy chocolate industry. And we taste the centuries-old traditions this home kitchen is bringing back.
My name is Elizabeth Rosales Aguilar. My company name is Raíz Chocolate. I make chocolate with Mexican-inspired recipes.
That sounds so lovely. If you want to listen to the full episode, you can find The Finest wherever you get your podcast. That's it for our weekend preview. As always, you can find details on The Finest and more arts events on our website, kpbs.org. I've been speaking with KPBS arts reporter and host of The Finest, Julia Dixon Evans. Julia, thank you.
Thank you, Jade. This was fun.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
From El Centro to everywhere, we're Voices del Valle.
Voices del Valle?
Voices del Valle is a team-produced podcast about coming of age in California's Imperial Valley.
I love Voices del Valle.
On the next episode of Voices del Valle, we will talk with teens about their cheer and soccer championship seasons. I've got to listen to that. Voices del Valle, fresh voices, bold stories made in the valley.
Voices del Valle. Find us on KPBS or wherever you get your podcasts.